Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. The sun is up over Camden Yards. We're going to play some baseball this week. Socially distanced, of course. Luke Jones will be on the scene over there. All of our wise conversations will continue out on the internet and our podcast audio vault as well. We'll be looking forward to adding this conversation. I get together with the Boston guys every about 6 months, whether it's a football game or a baseball game. Used to be a little bit more often. It hasn't been very competitive, Orioles, Red Sox, in that way very often over the course of my friendship with this guy. I was reading his work as a lad, chasing Earl Weaver around. It's always great to have an award-winning author on from the Boston Globe and longtime Red Sox insider. Welcome, Dan Shaughnessy, back on. I shouldn't say Red Sox insider, Dan. I mean, you're about to do a Celtics book, right? I mean, you're a man for all seasons of Boston.
Well, when you've been doing it as long as I have, Nestor, you touch on everything. Yeah. So in Boston, I'm a columnist. And we've had, as you know, a lot of Patriots activity over the last couple of decades, and Celtics are pretty good now. Bruins, I do them all, Nestor. I do them all.
When my cousin played for the Red Sox, 73, into the 70s, Fred Lynn and Rice and all that, I had a little Red Sox bobblehead that I had acquired in 1973 that followed me right into my marriage. When I married a woman from Manchester, New Hampshire, who has a closet full of Red Sox stuff, all of these years. But, I think back to like the bad Red Sox teams and the really good Celtics teams, or the bad Patriots teams, right? I've asked Bob Ryan, other Boston people, long timers, where are the Red Sox in all of this at this point? I mean, I said this to Luke, and he kind of shrugged me off because he loves baseball so much that baseball was back. But I watched that opening series, and just the fact that there's nobody there feels a little funereal. The fact that the team's no good, the weather was no good, and I know it's April and all of that,
Yeah.
but I feel the arc of wherever the Red Sox are and wherever baseball is, and certainly not going to be a very good campaign around here. We're kicking off a season where there used to be a lot of like hope and energy in these two markets. So the history of all this, just weird times coming out of this plague from a baseball standpoint.
Well, I share that. And again, I go back to, uh, I was thinking today, it's April 6th, and 48 years ago today, excuse me, drove in from Holy Cross, my logo here and my shirt, and Worcester, Massachusetts, with a bunch of New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts college sophomores. And we had tickets to Red Sox Yankees opening day. You could get tickets then. It was 1973. And it was Sox Yankees, just some bad seats out in right field. But
Well, you just want
I
to see
was,
what
I
the DH
was,
was all about, right?
it was
Exactly.
the first day of the DH. I was unaware we were going to see this. And Ron Blomberg batted for the Yanks first. And then Orlando Cepeda was the Sox guy. Sox beat him 15-5. And, Boston had a pretty big renaissance for baseball right after that with the 75 World Series, the Carlton Fisk home run, and just the drama that was built into that. And then those great teams they had with, Freddie Lynn and Jim Rice and Louis Tiant and straight through. And of course, in my view, the thing crescendoed in 03, 04 with the Red Sox Yankees. We had that, the biblical story of the 04 Sox, and then they win a bunch more World Series. And of course, I come to it as having gone to Baltimore in 1977, and that was really a time when both teams were good. They both won 97 games in 77, and you had a little back and forth. The Orioles were back in the World Series in 79, winning it in 83. Then it was the Sox turn. It's been rare that they've both been good at the same time. We just haven't had that. There's been some moments. So what the Orioles did to the Red Sox in 2011, ending their season at Camden Yards and getting everybody fired. Terry Francona, Theo Epstein left. All those players, like a million guys, was the last night of their careers. And since then, we've had this uneven thing. The O's did pop ahead of them one time, but the O's have played very well against the Sox. And to your point from last weekend, they just dominated them 18-5 over 3 days. I know they're projected as a 65 win team, and I understand. Looks like they're not trying as hard to win as the old days. And I don't know any. I mean, it was just depressing to not know hardly any of their players when they came through, or even the name of their manager. But they held themselves really well in Boston over the weekend, and I think you might win a few more than we thought. Means certainly looked like legitimate, major league pitcher, and I was glad to see Harvey have the good game. And they had some guys raking in that lineup, especially on Sunday. So I hope it's better, but they have not been subservient to the Red Sox in the last couple of years. That's good for them.
Yeah, I had Ken Singleton on last week. So you mentioned we were talking about Reggie and all of that type of stuff back in that era. When you were on the beat here at Memorial Stadium,
Hmm.
and how the game has changed, and how I'm a 52-year-old guy. My last name's Aparicio. You mentioned the
Yeah.
'73 Red Sox. I'm assuming my cousin was still at shortstop, and they weren't after Beniquez or Burleson at that point, right? But
Yeah.
I'm way back machine. They threw me out. This is my 15th year banned. I had a media pass for 21 years. I've now been banned almost as long as I had a media pass. And I see these baseball cards, the 75 Brett going for all this money. Like baseball's had sort of a renaissance in some ways with Mickey Mantle cards. And in other ways, they're going to quarter capacity this place and not have to worry about it most nights, because there aren't that many people that want to go. I'm really concerned about all of it. And I think the biggest story this week, race got brought up, Georgia got brought up, Hank Aaron got brought up. They're going to move the All-Star game. Baseball's got a labor problem again for the 40th year in a row or 50th year since Messersmith, right? Um, where's it going to be in 10 years, Dan? I mean, that's where my grip on all this is I still feel like I'm going to live here a little while longer. I just don't know if this thing's ever going to be relevant again because it needs so much love. And it's so hard to do in the modern era to make the kind of noise, to have the kind of market share the Red Sox had 15 years ago. It can only go one place but down once it has that sort of fever pitch, right?
Yeah, I know in our town, the Sox are never going to be what they were here. That again, it crested in 03, 04, steady decline
That's
since
hard to
then.
hear coming from you. You're
Well, I
Mr.
mean,
Red
it's a
Sox. You know what I
fact. It's
mean?
like everything you just said is true, and you're referencing the sport itself, Major League Baseball, and young people's attention spans, and people, getting their news on here. Baseball is not particularly good on this device, as opposed to some of the other games. Baseball, it's not strong for fantasy, for betting, for action, and what they've done with the game to make it 4-hour games and no balls in play is asking a lot. So you've got this older population that's still hanging in there. They're going to die off and not be replaced. And with people saw boxing and horse racing kind of go away, and baseball's got to be careful. They've got a really good game. There's still people playing it, and I have hopes for it, but not ever at the level that it was, especially in old towns like mine where it was the number one sport. Patriots are like 10 times more popular than the Red Sox right now. No question about it. And I don't like living in a football town. That's just the way it is now. But growing up, it was always Red Sox year round. But that population is older. They're not being replaced. I loved it in Baltimore when I saw it grow and emerge into the 70s and 80s when that team was hot. They finally rewarded by people coming out to the park. And then when you built Camden Yards, it's still a gem and it's still downtown. You got a beautiful downtown. So
We got a 2-year lease. That makes you feel good, right? Isn't that awesome? 2-year lease on
yeah,
this baby, man. Come on now.
I
Well,
mean, you
trade her in for next year's model.
yeah, you've had bad ownership for a long time, and that breaks my heart to see what's happened there because I still hold on to the golden days when it was so great. This is the 50th anniversary of 420 game winners. That won't happen again.
Well, I thought they would never wear the orange outfits again, but they did. That happened too. Dan
Yeah.
Shaughnessy is here, legendary sports writer out in Boston, covering the Red Sox or what's left of the Red Sox at this point. Man, I feel like we're a bunch of old white guys on the get off my lawn thing about baseball, and I look back on my lifetime and how much I loved it, and how much everybody who's my age in this town loved it. Loved everything about Cal Ripken and Brady Anderson. Loved everything about Brooks and Jim Palmer, who was on the game and freezing his ass off. Why they're making him sit outside and call a game on a 35-degree, I have no idea. But, all that bakes into it. Dan, they fired Gary Thorne here. I never thought he was like Mr. Oriole. He's Mr. Met, Mr. NHL for me, right? As a real fan. But the broadcast now are Scott and Ben McDonald's going to be in this. His nephew's pitching on the team now, pitching the game the other night, made a major league debut. Uh, the familiarity of the game for people here that want to put it on and see Rick Dempsey or see Jim Palmer or maybe even Mike Bordick, who was doing it for a while. And I know in your town it was Rem Dog, and you had all of these personalities. Here we had Chuck Thompson and John Miller before that. selling the game, like literally selling the game. And when I think of this place and the stadium sells itself and the courtyard and the Orioles bird and all of that, but on a night by night basis, the entertainers who called games on radio or TV, whether it's the mascot, the players, Wild Bill Hagee, some idiot on the radio like me, or some sports writer pissing everybody off talking about curses, like things that made it relevant and topical and conversational and sold it like Vince McMahon. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
Kenny Cooper sold soccer here when you were, like literally, there's none of that. And I mean, it's not Rob Manfred, it's not Alex Rodriguez on TV. I'm wondering. The only thing that can save it is something that makes it a little sizzly. And they have a television product that, I mean, I just scratch my head and say, what could they do better? What could they do differently? If you and I were running it even 15 years ago, how would we have made it better? I mean, I would, I don't know what the answer to that is.
I mean, there are things about the game that are just not going to be conducive to what you're talking about to making it better. But I think that baseball could have more marketing, and I think they could have their players be a little bit more relevant to today's tastes, I guess you'd say. Like the players don't think there's anything wrong with the pace of play. I mean, they don't know what you're talking about if you say, 345 is kind of a lot for a game, and 18 strikeouts for the Orioles and 17 for the Red Sox. That's not action. But what this has been pounded into them by the analytics guys and by it's taught now. Don't have a ball in play, strike the guy out, work the count, grind. Well, you get a grinding product that's hard to watch, and that's problematic. And it needs to have like people like Mookie Betts, Tatis. These guys need to be marketed like LeBron James and Aaron Rodgers. I mean, they need to be kind of international, global stars. They've got a sport that's played in other parts of the world, and more effort I think can be made to have those guys just be signature guys. If they need to get on social media themselves, they should join in like the NBA guys do. It's today. I mean, I worry, to your point, Nestor, the betting component will be the thing that maybe saves everybody when they're betting on the next pitch. It's 3-0. What are the odds of this being a strike? And just this nonstop, because that's coming. That's why you don't see any teams changing hands.
Well, you got to get me interested in it first.
I know.
You have to make me understand launch angle and,
Yeah.
like it's a whole new, I guess that's what I'm getting at with the Rick Dempseys and guys getting phased out. I mean, you're never going to be the guy you were 30 years ago in the press box running around chasing these kids around who want no part of us at all, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in any language. And then I'm thinking, well, if you don't want any part of us, you don't want any part of social media, and you don't really want to touch the fans, you don't really want to go on TV, and your broadcasters are not exciting at all, and the game's 3 hours. I mean, I had 3 meals on Sunday, Dan. You know what I mean? I felt like literally I got hungry in the 7th inning,
Sure.
and I'm like, what time? It's 5 o'clock. What the hell are they doing still playing baseball? And then the Yankees game starts at 6:30 on Monday night. I missed the first inning. I put it on at 6:50 because I watched a little evening news, and it's the 2nd inning. I'm trying to figure out what they're doing. Like, what's going to make a guy who's loved baseball all his life like me come back, and the people that I know, let alone the next generation. And I don't know where their next great idea is. And they're fighting over whether the shortstop shouldn't go across the bag. I guess that's a good fight to have, because for me, it really has kind of wrecked the game that the analytics are something that it's not that I don't understand them or I wasn't good at math or whatever. When you watch the game, they're not teaching it to you that way. You know what I mean? And someone that has to be the bridge for me. Is like you talk about horse racing. You got to learn to read the form if you want to bet on it, right?
Yeah, it's all these things are real. I don't have the answers to them either. It's problematic, and I don't know how they're going to fix it, because a lot of what you're talking about for fixes are artificial implements. Like 2 players on each side of second base. I don't like that. It's artificial. You have 9 defenders, put them where you want. The offense should be able to figure out how to get around the shift, hit it the other way, drop down a bunt, but no one's doing that. And again, what's being taught is an unwatchable product, and that's what's being stressed. And it's not good for the product. It's not good for the fans. Ultimately, it won't be good for the players.
Dan Shaughnessy joining us here from Boston. Talk about the Red Sox as a franchise. I mean, we talk about the Orioles all day long. I mean, the Red Sox used to be real easy. They would just go and sign the pitcher they wanted and the player they wanted and pay them. And sometimes a guy would go to the Yankees, and sometimes the guy would come back, a Damon here and Ellsbury, whatever,
Yeah.
a Clemens. I mean, they were sort of borrowing them and passing them around. That feels like it's over for now. And it was brought on by opening day weekend and the emptiness of it, and that's all COVID related. There would have been 34,000 people freezing their asses off there last week, and there would have been more energy for bad baseball, I guess. But a little bit of, I've almost felt sorry for the Red Sox, Dan, and I didn't even want to admit that to you. It makes me want to itch a little bit, but I did. I felt sorry for all of it, and I thought, man, the fans up there are a lot more invested than what we had here. They thought that ownership would always care and they'd always have to be 1 or 1A. And it feels like they're taking a little bit of a mulligan with people's money in Boston. And that feels kind of dirty.
Yeah, it's not a good time for that relationship right now. I mean, the fans, they're smart here and they see what's happening. There's a little bit of ownership falling back. They've won 4 World Series in 20 years and this ownership group. So, and they're kind of coasting on that right now as they reorganize and appear to be trying to become the Tampa Bay Rays, like a team with draft and development that won't keep its stars and will operate on the cheap. That's what I see. They've done this for a couple of years now. They still have old payroll. They're like third or fourth or fifth in payroll because they have a lot of dead money on people that aren't on the team anymore. David Price, Andrew Benintendi, Dustin Pedroia, Chris Sales on the IL. They just aren't getting production from the people that they paid a lot of money to. A lot of them aren't here. And they've gone the cheap route for the people to replace them. And they've got some they bring in Marwin Gonzalez and Kiki Hernandez short-term deals. And then a lot of guys you haven't heard. They brought back Hunter Renfroe. And it's just, it's not the Red Sox that you remember from a few years ago. And they're not bringing in the guys you talk about, Damon, Schilling, big name guys with good years ahead of them. So I don't know. They've got to draft and develop. That takes a while. And in Boston, there's not a lot of patience to bottom out the way that the Orioles have. The Cubs were allowed to do that, and then they came back strong. I think that's what they're trying to do here. I liked it better 10, 15 years ago when they were able to draft and develop and compete every year. And they did that. They were drafting Mookie Betts and Benintendi and Jackie Bradley Jr. and all those guys while they were winning World Series in 11 and 13, I should say. But there's no longer, now it seems to be an either or thing. And I think a lot of the fans are wise to what ownership's doing. If you looked at this from afar, you'd say they're getting ready to sell it, but no one is selling a team. And I don't think these guys are interested in selling, but they're behaving like people that are trying to get ready to sell.
Yeah, we're familiar with that here in Baltimore with the owner with the cowboy boots in Nashville, and everybody's clinking for a team down there. Dan Shaughnessy's here. I guess before I let you go, the notion that fans are sold into, well, they had to blow it up. They have to do it this way. That's a marketing technique that I will never get over, that I'm going to drink lousy coffee for 5 years waiting for a good cup and keep coming back. I mean, that doesn't even make American sense to me. But I think back to the 70s and what you inherited here, and the Orioles were being run on because they had no money, right? And there was Reggie and Baylor and Grit, just go down the line when that happened. And here we are all these years later, and we talk about this is my 30th year in radio, Dan. I started in 92 when this opened that year, and we had all the money, and it was us and the Blue Jays, and nobody was spending money. Nobody had stadia, right? They were trying to get their deals. And I remembered then arguing about, if they don't fix the imbalance and then they create this phony tax that everybody's trying to get under, and the Nesson deal throws off all this money. Masson talks about it, and 15 years later, they didn't put a nickel into either one of these franchises. They just pocketed all the money. And I guess all these years later, I think like the real original sin of all of this is the fact that they couldn't figure out how to make all these owners have a floor and a ceiling and a cap that they avoided forever thinking would help them. And in the end, they just hate each other. So, and that'll boil up again next year. It really is more of a labor feud at the heart of all of it than there is any sport or keeping things fair.
Well, you put your finger on, that's a really dire future right now, and because this is the last year of the basic agreement, all the distrust that you just laid out is there. It's very real. And talk about a sport that can ill afford any kind of a work stoppage. There is no appetite for that. And this is going to be tough sledding, I think, over the next year as they get through this season, figure out what they're going to do with their basic agreement going into the next year. And I think it'll be bloody. And I think a work stoppage, it, you always say it could kill them, and nothing's ever killed it yet, but it would be a huge setback.
One of the great memories of my career in 30 years of going through pictures, I found the picture of you, me, and Bill Walton together
I love it.
at the '98 Super Bowl. And I have the piece. And Bill admonished me in the piece, and he was talking old deadhead stuff in San Diego. We were trading some wooden stuff, and you had all sorts of insider stuff with him in Boston. You're doing a Bird Celtics era kind of thing, and I guess this is what you do when the Red Sox are no good, except bitching about them. You actually praise the Celtics a little bit and go back into the Wayback Machine. You talk about sports getting it wrong with baseball and money, Dan. Basketball seems to have really done things the right way, in a leadership way. We talk about the mistakes made last century into this century. The NBA has created something that I don't love the product in a night by. I don't recognize it all that much, but boy, the world loves it.
Yeah, they do pretty well as a global entity, and their stars are stars around the world, and people buy their merchandise and all that stuff. Watching the game, the endless three-pointers, and I can't, there's no more low post play, no more half-court game. It's hard for me to watch, but so yeah, during the pandemic, what else is there to do? You write a book. So I covered the Celtics every day from 82 through 86. Larry Bird was MVP 3 times, but in those days, Nestor, you were there. Well, you were little, but you could get to know your team, and you could tell the readers what they were like. And when I covered the Orioles, same thing. You're on the buses.
Dan, I wasn't little, man. I was reading. That's how I covered the team. You know what I mean? Like, I was fanatic. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I hung on every word that Bob Mazel was giving me, or Jackman, or you, or like anyone that was writing that stuff. So that was the outlet. You're right, for sure.
Yeah, and we were really able to, we lived with them. Airports, hotels, waiting for bags, all that stuff. Did it with the Orioles, did it with the Celtics, and that's not coming back either. So yeah, old guy, get off my lawn. I wrote a book. It's called Wish It Lasted Forever, Life with the Larry Bird Celtics, and that'll be out in November. But that's the thing I was able to do, because where else are you going? I'm in my office here all day, and you don't see anybody. So you talk to people on the phone, and you go back in the Wayback Machine and talk about the days when we could tell you what the athletes were like, because we talked to them and we were around them all day long, every day.
Well, the first minute I could drive was in 84, 85. The first things I did was got down to the Capitol Center to see Larry Bird play, to see Kareem play, to see Dr. J play. I actually covered Dr. J's last game at the paper. So, that is the era, right, of, satellite delay for the NBA Finals and all of that stuff, man. Dan, love your work. Appreciate you. I appreciate you always. Great gratitude for always making time and coming on and storytelling. What's your best Bird story? Did you ever shoot free throws with Bird or anything like that? I'm sure you drank beer with him and all that cheer stuff, but I mean, what's the story you can tell?
Well, he wrote me into a free throw contest. His hand was all taped up at practice, and he was taping it like that. And I asked him after practice if he could do that in a game. He said, no, but I could tape my whole hand and make more than you. And so he taped it. He had this figured out. We took 100 free throws, and I lost $160 shooting free throws against Larry Bird with his taped up hand.
That's a lot of money in 85, right?
I expensed it. It bounced back the first time, but we got a second look at it. And
you're like, look, I could take him out for a meal, or I could lose a free throw competition.
$160, a serious dough. And if you ever see Larry Bird say, how much did you take off Shaughnessy in 1984? He'll say $160. He never forgets.
Jackman did the same thing to Jack Gibbons at the Evening Sun. I'm sure expensing gas mileage down to Landover. Dan, thank you. Stay safe up there during this crazy COVID era. I feel bad that we haven't had a Fenway Frank together in years, but in trying to circle with people, actually seeing them on Zoom, it makes me want to come to Boston and just like see people again and be in Fenway Park when it's vibrant again, and have my wife's family there hating on the Orioles and doing all the things we used to do. But until then, thank you. We'll see you soon. Okay.
Take care, Nestor. Thank you.
All right. Dan Shaughnessy writing a book on the Celtics. Go pick it up. Comes out in November. I'll get him back on and tell some more stories and some old Bill Walton stuff and all that stuff. McHale throwing elbows around, doing that stuff. You can find me nasty at WNST.net. The Orioles and the Red Sox are getting it on this weekend. Luke will be at Camden Yards checking all that out. We are WNST.net. Towson, Baltimore. We never stop talking Baltimore positive.